Hey everyone, I'm Chris at Createx Colors. We are in the booth today and I'm just putting the finishing touches on this panel that we're going to use as a demo in this video. And this is going to be kind of a simple demonstration of a breakdown on how to get started. Basically how to get started on a hard surface, right? So this is kind of an all-encompassing, really simple, the steps that we recommend and the process for you guys anytime you're painting something what we consider a hard surface. Not necessarily an automotive refinish, but anything that would fall into that category of a harder substrate. So for that, I have this powder coated panel. It's an aluminum panel that has like a factory OEM style powder coat on it. So the first step in that is to scuff it. And this is a popular product. If you've seen other videos we do, actually we talked about it in the basics too, a video I did. I covered red and gray Scotch-Brite pads or scuff pads. A lot of companies make them. It's a very common product. You can find them out in auto body supply stores, online, whatever. There's a bunch of different manufacturers, but the red is kind of the middle of the road. It is like a medium coarse, right on a 320 grit scratch. So that's kind of what we're going to recommend. And it's a perfect product to put a tooth or a surface prep on the panel that you're prepping. So you don't need to go crazy aggressive with these. All you want to do, again, on this panel, is if you can see, is just knock that shine. This had a semi-black finish on it. Now it looks gray because of the Scotch pad. So that's all you're trying to do is just knock the tooth off this. And what you're doing also at the same time is kind of getting off any kind of surface contamination that might be left over. So that is step one. So we're going to get right into this. And we're talking about what we're going to do. We're going to go through the steps. So step one is the prep. Again, you're not leaning on it. You're not digging on it. All you're doing is giving a nice even pressure wipe to knock the shine off the surface. So we talk about after that is done. This is actually a water-based pre-cleaner. Now, there's water-based and solvent-based pre-cleaners, and I actually touched on this prior to this in another video in terms of when to use it and when not to use it. So, because I'm starting my paint process, right? We're starting the process of putting material down. So, I'm going to use a water-based pre-cleaner. For this again, this is right out of the package. It's not dirty. It shouldn't be grimy. So, a water-based pre-cleaner is going to be more than enough to. That's all I do is just a little spray on. Wiping in with a wet towel, and then I'll come back and give it a final wipe with a clean towel. That's all you want to do. And you can see a little bit of that black residue is coming off. So you want to switch to a clean towel. And you keep wiping until it is totally dry, and there should not be any black residue left on your towel. And now going to the towel. This is a lint-free towel. It's like a low-lint pre-paint towel. You're going to want to use something like this. You can use paper towels. But just keep in mind the paper towels are going to leave a lot more those little fuzzies behind, and you have just residue basically from the towel, those fibers from the towel. So that's where a tack rag is going to come in handy. Now we're still going to tack this off, but you're going to have to just be more careful that extra step in tacking if you are just going to use like a traditional paper towel. So not totally necessary on the lint-free towel, but it is going to help you in the long run. So now that this is all wiped down, before we move to the next step, I'll talk about that real quick, that water-based cleaner, right? So now this is before I started painting. So water-based cleaner is acceptable, and it's also going to do kind of an extra thing in turning of knocking off that static electric charge that you might have. And this is more apparent when you're doing fiberglass and plastics, and plastics fall into this hard surface category, but the water will actually neutralize any of that static, where sometimes a solvent-based pre-cleaner will actually intensify that static charge. So once you are actually painting, you want to use a solvent-based degreaser. But really in that paint process, unless something really catastrophic happens where you're touching this thing after you're eating like a cheese pizza, you shouldn't have to go back and really clean aggressively the project that you're painting. So again, you don't have to use a water-based. You can use a solvent-based pre-clean. That's totally fine, but that's just one of the added benefits of the water-based is it kind of kills that static charge if there is one. So I am going to get this set up on our easel, and I'm going to actually show you what it is that we're going to do for the first application. So this is black. So let's say we want to go with a lighter color, and I think for this we'll use maybe our Wicked Opaque Daylight Blue or something like that, a brighter color, right? So what we'll do is I'll put down a coat, our ground coat of our AutoBorne Sealer. So that's going to be my first step, is covering this nice and even and getting rid of these sand scratches that are left over from my Scotch pad. So 2 coats of AutoBorne Sealer, that's going to be the ticket. So what we'll do is before we actually go right into that, I'll show you the AutoBorne Sealer. This is our 6001 AutoBorne Sealer and our 4011 reducer. So 10% is where we want you to be. But again, if you've watched other videos, when you're doing a project like this, it's not intensely critical that you're exactly 10%. Again, depending on your spray equipment, what you're doing, if you're using an airbrush or smaller tip size to apply AutoBorne Sealer, you might want to go 15% or maybe even 20 because it's a smaller tip size. For this, I'm going to use an LPH 80, my Iwata LPH 80. It's a great little gun for this, just to show you guys the coverage as well. That's a 1-2, and 10% is going to be perfectly fine. So I'm going to go right around, just about 4 ounces of paint, and I'm just eyeballing this. And honestly, 10% at 4 ounces is just under a half an ounce. It's really like just about that much. It's not a lot. So eyeballing it for something like this is okay. There's not going to be a real negative if you under reduce. You're just going to notice that it might not flow as well. And if that's the case, you can just come back, add a little bit more reducer, and you're going to achieve that flow. That's exactly what I'm looking for, is that flow off the stick. You don't want it to be too watery, but you don't want it to be too thick either. So right around 10%. You got to let this sit for about 5 minutes. I'm going to stir this really good for about a minute to make sure this is all mixed in together. One thing with water-based products, the reducer sometimes has a tendency to kind of sit on the top instead of really like going right into the paint. So you really want to make sure you're critically mixing this for about a minute. And then I'm going to let that sit while I get my panel up on the easel, and I will get it tacked off, and we'll see you guys in a moment when we're ready to spray. All right, guys, we are back in the booth. It is running. We are ready to spray. I got my mask. I got this wiped down, tacked off. It's all ready to go. So this is going to be coat number 1 of our white sealer. So I'm going to do 2 coats. We'll show you guys both coats, show what it looks like. It's going to be a medium wet coat. It's a nice, even medium wet coat, 50% overlap, and it should cover extremely well. So this is coat number 1. All right, welcome back. Coat number 1 is dry. It's been about 10 minutes. I mean, we have really good air movement, and something I always talk about is the humidity and temperature. Right now, we're right around 70 degrees, and we got about 60% humidity, which is pretty good. It's a little high on the humidity, but it's okay. 10 minutes, this is totally dry. I'm ready for my second coat. So I'm going to do one last coat just to get a couple of these edges nice. I'm going to do the same exact thing. It's a medium wet coat, 50% overlap. We're going to let that dry, and then we'll be on to step number 2, which is the colors. So this is coat number 2 of the sealer. All right, everyone, welcome back. Our sealer white is totally dry. It's been about an hour or so now. I got a little bit of tape on there. We're going to do a couple of sections to show you guys kind of what we're talking about when we talk about mixing. So I know I said I was going to use the daylight blue, the Wicked Opaque daylight blue, but for this I'm going to actually use the Laguna blue for a reason. We'll get into that. This is the Laguna blue right here. So I already have a little bit in the cup. What I'm going to do is just reduce this. I'm going to eyeball, there's about 3 ounces of paint in here, so I'm going to eyeball 10%. 3 ounces, that's right about where you want to be. And we're going to give this a good mix. And I'm actually going to use my TH2, which is kind of the largest airbrush that Iwata has. It's a 0.6, so it's going to be perfect for spraying this. Nice fan, little fan pattern on it. So again, we're mixing this. I'm going to let this sit for about 5 minutes before I spray. I'm going to mix it really good for about a minute just to allow that reducer to really work into the paint and really kind of melt everything all together and give it a nice, even, uniform breakdown in terms of the actual paint. So I'm going to get this loaded into my gun, and we'll see you guys in a minute. All right, everyone, we are back. Booth is running, and I'm ready to go. This is my TH2, and I'm going to spray my first coat. Hey guys, we are back. Coat number 1 is dry. It's pretty transparent, so this is coat number 2. You can see now I'm starting to fill in a little bit. It's getting a little bit more uniform, so we're probably going to do one more coat after this and see how that looks. So we're going to let this dry, and we'll do coat number 3. Okay, coat number 2 is dry. This is coat number 3. we are back. I opted to put a fourth and final coat of the blue over it because, again, it is a little transparent. So we are actually taking this opportunity before we go to our next step to show you guys in terms of taping. It's been about an hour between spraying that last coat and me putting a piece of tape on here now. So that's something you want to keep in mind too, is typically the best results, about a solid hour is good in typical conditions, and what we refer to as about 70 degrees. 55 to 65% humidity, 70 degrees is kind of optimum in terms of those. So 1 hour, we got this tape for our next step, and that is going to be that same color. It's going to be the Wicked Laguna Blue, but we're going to actually go over to the bench and mix that, and I'm going to mix that with a little bit of our 40-50. So we'll see you guys at the table. All right, we're back at the table, and I'm actually not going to use a fresh mixing cup or anything at all, just to kind of show you guys how easy it is for this. I'm just going to take the lid off this PPS cup, and we're going to put in a little bit of 40-50, and right around 10 to 25% is kind of what we're recommending for solid colors like this. 10% is going to be totally fine, especially for a smaller spray gun like this little airbrush. So again, I'm going to eyeball this. That's about it right there. Just a splash. I'm going to mix it in. This is the existing paint that I already had reducer in, that I was already spraying. It was probably just about 2 ounces left, so just a little bit of 40-50 in there, and I'm just checking for the flow. I want to make sure it's still going to move the way I want, and that's good. I won't even have to reduce this. So we're going to let this sit for a minute while I mix this up, get the lid back on, and we'll be back at that panel to spray our Laguna Blue. All right, we're back. We're ready to spray. Now this is my Wicked Laguna Blue with right around, like I said, like 10-15% 40-50. And now what I'm going to do is actually show you guys really the difference. If you saw how I applied the Laguna Blue down here, I was a little faster just to get a little bit drier coating, just to build up my color, where now mixing with the 40-50, even at that small amount, it's going to allow me to move. I'm going to move a little bit slower, but I'm going to put a nice, even, a little bit heavier coat on. Nice medium wet coat instead of more on the dry side. And you can really see how much smoother it goes on, how it's going to level and flow a lot better than it was without it. Even at a 10-15% addition of that 40-50, it really does change how this paint reacts and how it moves. So we're going to let that dry, and we'll be back to do coat number 2. All right, guys, coat number 1 is totally dry, and that's actually something that would be kind of counterintuitive, but it does dry a little bit faster with that 40-50. So it's looking pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and do a second coat and see what that looks like, and I might have to maybe just do like a third coat and make sure I didn't have any little blotchy areas, but we're going to compare it to that first like 4.5 passes with just the Laguna Blue without. So this is coat number 2. Again, I'm going a little bit slower pace because I can actually build this color up to get a nice solid coverage. Same thing, I'm doing about a 50% overlap. Nice and easy. I'm spraying right around 35 PSI, which is, I feel, a pretty good spot with the TH2. So this is 2 coats. If I wanted to move a little bit faster, I would just add a little bit more reducer. But remember, I used what reducer I already had in the paint and just added the 40-50. So again, you can make your adjustments. If that's not fast enough for you, if you want to be able to move faster, you can just add a little more reducer. So we're going to let this dry, see what it looks like, and we'll compare it to our first panel. All right, we're back. Coat number 2 is totally dry, and there's a few little spots, because you can see up here on the yellow tape, you can still see it, like the tape has a green tint to it, just because these colors are a little bit more transparent in nature. So there's a few spots that are a little see-through here and there, so I'm going to do 1 more coat just to try to even it up, but we're still only going to do 3 coats as opposed to the right around a little over 4 on the bottom. It's like 4.5 really on that bottom. So just to kind of show you guys the difference in how you can spray this with the addition of the 40-50. And once that's dry, I'm going to go ahead and untape the top, and we're going to spray our Wicked Opaque Daylight Blue, and that'll really show the difference in coverage. So I'm going to do coat number 3 right now. We're going to let that dry up, and I'll pull the paper so we can kind of take a look at it, see what it looks like. And we'll do that comparison. So this is, again, same thing, nice, even, kind of a methodical 50-50 overlap. Now I'm seeing a little bit more color built up on that. I'm happy with that. So what we'll do is too, while it's still wet, I'll just pull this tape, you guys can see the difference. Now it is gonna look a little bit lighter because it is wet, but once that dries, we got a little over 4 coats on the bottom. This is 3 coats. And then we'll untape the top and we'll do our, like I said, our opaque daylight blue, and I'll probably be able to get really good saturated coverage with just 1 coat. So it'll be a good comparison. So we'll see you guys in a minute. All right, everyone, we are back. We're ready to spray our last color, and this is gonna be our, like I mentioned, our Wicked Opaque Daylight Blue. With this, I mixed it the same way. I just did 10%, right around 10% 4011 reducer. For this product, there's no need to mix in the 4050, because it is already an acrylic urethane. It's already like part of that formula. That's another thing that kind of increases the sprayability of this product. So we are gonna do just a comparison. I'm gonna do 2 coats. I'm gonna spray it the exact same way, 50-50 overlap, same air pressure, same gun, right? And we're gonna just do a kind of a letdown panel, if you will, in comparison to show the coverage and the attributes of these different mixing ingredients, I guess. So this is gonna be coat number 1. You can see, same thing, I'm spraying a little bit heavier, more like I sprayed the mix with the 4050. And this is extremely saturated in terms of color. I'll probably, I mean, honestly, if I was doing this, I'd get away with 1 coat. And the only reason I go back and put a second, just to make sure it's even and I didn't miss anything. Because again, we don't really recommend hammering on a coat, but that's a nice medium wet coat. You can see how wet that is. It's not dry, it's just nice, fast building up. So medium wet coat, we're gonna let that dry, and we'll be back to do coat number 2. Okay, we are back. Coat number 1 is dry, and that is another thing I want to touch on. I mean, I say this a lot when we do video, is it is imperative that each coat is totally dry between coats. This is not a product that you want to use wet on wet. If it's a little bit wet, don't try to go and put another coat. You're gonna have better results, better dry times, better everything if you are doing a coat on top of something that's dry. So make sure it's dry. So this is like totally dry to the touch. And we're gonna do coat number 2. This looks great the way it is, but I'm gonna do 1 more coat, like I said, just to make sure it's nice and even. And we'll pull the paper off and kind of do a side-by-side comparison on the color and the coverage and what we have. So same thing, 50% overlap. We'll see what we got. I think you can even tell on the tape, I mean, that tape is just about blocked out in 1 coat, you know, 1 pass. So that's a huge thing with this product. So I'm gonna put this down, we'll be right back, and I will untape this. Let me see what we got. So you can see the daylight blue is not Laguna blue. It is a little bit different in terms of the color. But in terms of blocking out, even though it is white, and we went over white, I mean, this is solidly covered in 2 coats. So we have, comparatively, this is the Laguna blue right out of the bottle with 10% reducer. This was about 4, a little over 4. I did like 4 and like a half coats just to make sure it was even, because it is transparent. So if you see any droplets, essentially, you want to even that out. So I kind of did that last coat just to make it even. And this was the same color, the Laguna blue, mixed with the 4050, right around 10, 15%, and 10% reducer. And you can see that was 3 coats. And this color, it's the same color. It is a little bit darker. I was able to get a better color saturation with that 10% 4050. And now back to this. This is 2 coats. You can see it's already starting to dry here on the edges. Just a little bit of air movement. This is starting to dry up. But this was 2 coats, and it is totally covered and totally saturated. So it's something to keep in mind. You know, when you're doing something smaller, it's not a big deal to use it 10% right out of the bottle. There's no reason we can't. The product works fantastic like that. But again, for that added sprayability and coverage, especially when doing something larger. If you're doing it for airbrush work, it's not super imperative, but when you're spraying a background or spraying something larger scale, a little bit of that 4050 just helps with that hold together, that film build and the consistent finish, nice, smooth, the way it lays down. It's great for doing tape work in terms of graphics and line separation. It just gives you a nice, even surface to work on. And again, back to the opaques, that 4050 essentially is kind of a part of that resin system already. So all you're doing is hitting it with a little bit of 4011 reducer, and you're ready to spray. So I hope this kind of gives you guys a nice visual. What we'll do is let this dry up, and we'll show you guys top coating. So we'll cover that in a little bit. All right, guys, we are back at the table, and before we broke off, I untaped this, and now you can kind of see exactly what we're talking about. We have, this is our sealer white, and then the two colors that are basically the same but different. So there's the Laguna blue with the 4011, just 10% 4011. This is the Laguna blue with the 10% 4050 and 4011, and this was our Wicked Opaque Daylight blue with just 4011 in it. So you can see, I mean, obviously the color is different, but in terms of the amount of coats, this was right like 4.5. I'm calling it 4.5, so you could really go 5 coats to get coverage. This was 3 coats, and this was 2 coats. And you can see even at this difference here with the amount of material that was on here, this is a little bit darker and richer in color. This is lighter, still showing a little bit of that white through it. So it just kind of shows you what you can do and how far a little bit of 40-50, the difference in that 40-50, especially again, we're talking about larger spray gun applications. Not so much airbrushing, but if you're doing larger panels, larger spraying in your small or full-size spray gun, it's going to make a big difference in terms of how you can apply that paint and what you can expect to achieve for the film build and coverage. So before we broke off, I told you that we were going to put some clear over the top of this, and for that we're going to use our 40-50, our UVLS Gloss, our 40-50. So I'm going to put a little bit in here, and actually for this I'm going to, instead of using my TH2, I'm going to go to my LPH 80. Usually I'd use a large spray gun, but for something like this is great, and especially for kind of what we're talking about in terms of smaller projects. The LPH 80 is a great gun for that. So it's a 1-2, so it's a good size for spraying this product. I'm going to go, same thing, I'm going to eyeball it, so we're going to put about 6 ounces in here roughly. A splasher reducer, right on 10%. That's right about there. Not 6 ounces, it's about there. We're going to mix this up, and we are going to see you guys in a minute. When I get this all mixed in my gun, we're going to put down a couple coats of clear. All right, welcome back. The booth is running, and we are ready to put our first coat of our UVLS, our 40-50 Gloss Clear down. So again, this is kind of the same exact procedure in terms of how I applied my base coat. You want a 50% overlap. We're probably going to be about 5-6 inches off the panel, and that's plenty of working room, and I'm spraying right around the manufacturer's recommended pressure. Iwata wants you right around 14-15 psi in this gun, so nothing crazy in terms of settings. Everything is right where you want it to be. Again, it's a 1-2, and this is what it looks like. All right, everyone, welcome back. We are totally done spraying clear coat. I did 3 coats of our 40-50. We didn't show every coat, but we did 3 coats. It's going to give a nice even film and enough material on there to sand if you wanted to, because that's one of the things I wanted to talk about is when you apply this product, our 40-50, or generally all of our products, we want you to put it on and let it dry thoroughly between each coat. So we don't want to go wet on wet. For the maximum performance of the product, the best look, we want you to let it dry in between coats. And one of the nice things about having to do that or letting that dry between coats is the ability to actually work this product if you wanted to. If you had dust nibs or tape lines that you wanted to sand down, you could do that between coats. You don't have to wait for it to completely dry like you would a solvent clear. So this also makes it an excellent inner coat. So again, if you have a lot of graphics going on, a lot of stuff you wanted to sand down to lose any of those graphic tape lines, those edges, you can use our product for that and then transition to a 2K for the final clear coat over that. So that's what we'll talk about as well. So for this, we did three coats of our 40-50, 100%. If you wanted to get a little more increase in gloss, right? So you want, especially what we talked to, automotive, we referred automotive, like if you had a helmet, motorcycle tins or something like that, panels, you really want that rich automotive type finish. We get a lot of questions about that. Is our paint compatible with a 2K? And it absolutely is. So for this application, right, for what we're talking about, this is PPG's EC550. Now, this is a product that I've been using for quite a while. I've been using PPG products for a long time. And this is part of their EnviroBase line, and it is specifically made for water-based finishes. It's a great product. It's a catalyzed 2K clear, but sometimes you might not always have the capability or the means of spraying a 2K clear, right? If you're in a garage, it's really better if you're doing this in a controlled environment like a booth environment. So another great option is a 2K in a can. And this is actually a great product from our friends at Spray Max. And it is a 2K in an aerosol. So there's actually a little bit of hardener in the bottom of this. You pull this knob off the top, you put it on the bottom of the can, you slap it down, and it actually activates the clear that's in here with a hardener. So it sprays just like a 2K. It gets hard. It's a totally catalyzed clear. When you do that, though, it does actually affect the pot life of the can. I think it's 24 to 36 hours before it becomes basically unsprayable, but that's not anything dissimilar than a regular urethane. So this is a great option for our friends at Spray Max, especially if you're doing something, again, in your garage or something where it's not a huge project, but you want to have a 2K clear over the top of that. This is a great product. So before we go, one more time, we'll kind of quickly wrap this up, go through the steps, right? We started with our AutoBorne Sealer White, so that was 2 coats of AutoBorne Sealer White over the whole panel. And then we went to our Wicked Laguna Blue, right? So we mixed that 10% 4011 right out of the bottle, and that was at the bottom here. You can see that was almost 5 coats to get a nice even coverage and get some good depth of color there. And then what we did was we actually took that same Laguna Blue and we used our 4050 at 10%, and it totally changed the way that product sprays. Remember, we did 3 coats of color. You can see how much, a little bit darker that is in at 3 coats than it was at the bottom, because I was able to put on a little bit more of a medium wet coat of paint, and it just holds together that much better. It sprays just at 10%. You know, the durability and the sprayability of that product in terms of the surface and everything is improved. And then the end all be all at the top here, this is our brand new, this is our Wicked Opaque Daylight Blue. And it is a little bit different color, but we were just doing it just to show how fast and how color saturated. This is 2 coats. So we have 5, 3, and 2. And this is just a great product. You know, if you want some rich, vibrant color that's going to really cover extremely well. And don't forget, when we sprayed this was just 4011. You didn't have to mix the 4050. This is actually, our Wicked Opaques are actually a acrylic urethane right out of the bottle. So all you do is just mix a little bit of 4011 and you're ready to go. So that, I think, wraps this project up. I hope this answers some questions that you guys might have on hard surface applications. For more information, you go to creatextech.com and check out the Wicked Colors SDS sheets, and or the TDS sheets. And for Createx Colors, I'm Chris Arpin, and we'll see you guys next time.